had more men, more armor, and absolute confidence. By nightfall, those advantages would become liabilities. What happens when everything an army believes about war turns against it? The field is narrow, hemmed in by trees and soaked with rain. Boots sink where confidence once stood firm. Ahead waits an army certain of victory. More men, more armor, more pride. Behind stands no easy retreat, only hunger, sickness, and a long road already walked in fear. On this ground, ideas about power, honor, and war itself are about to be tested. Not by grand maneuver or heroic charge, but by endurance, restraint, and the quiet brutality of reality. The question hanging in the cold air is not who is braver or who is nobler, but whether the old rules of war still matter when the ground refuses to hold them. For generations, England and France had been locked in a conflict that was as much about legitimacy as land. The English crown claimed rights in France that were contested, resented, and periodically enforced by war. These claims were not only legal arguments, they were symbols of authority and survival. For a young king like Henry V, newly crowned and keenly aware of his fragile position at home, France represented both opportunity and necessity. Victory abroad could silence rivals, unite a restless nobility, and transform a contested ruler into a divinely favored monarch. Henry's campaign began with confidence, but quickly became a test of endurance. Disease ravaged his army. Supplies dwindled. The long march through hostile territory drained strength and morale. What began as a bold assertion of royal will narrowed into a desperate attempt to reach safety. Each mile forward carried the weight of failure behind it. The English army that approached Agincourt was not seeking glory, it was seeking survival. The French host gathered with a very different expectation. This was their land, their moment, their advantage. They outnumbered the English by a wide margin, fielding ranks of armored knights and men-at-arms, drawn from the highest levels of nobility. For many, the coming battle promised honor, ransom, and reputation. Victory seemed not only likely, but inevitable. The contrast between the armies ran deeper than numbers. The French embodied a chivalric tradition that prized shock, valor, and the decisive charge. War, in this vision, was a stage upon which noble lineage proved itself in steel. The English, by contrast, were hardened professionals. Their strength lay not in cavalry, but in disciplined infantry and archers trained from youth to kill at distance. Their confidence, if it existed at all, rested on preparation rather than pride. Each side carried assumptions into the field. The French believed weight and nobility would decide the day. The English believed restraint and positioning might yet save them. Only one of those beliefs would survive the mud. The battlefield at Agincourt was deceptively simple. A narrow strip of plowed earth bordered by woods. Recent rain had turned the soil into a clinging mire. What appeared open from a distance became a funnel, compressing movement and magnifying every step. This was not ground for maneuver. It was ground that punished haste and rewarded patience. The English took position first, planting stakes before their archers and anchoring their line against the forest edges. They waited. The French waited too long, longer than expected, confident that time itself favored them. But with each passing moment, the field worsened. Armor grew heavier. The earth grew softer. The stage was set not for a charge, but for a collapse. When the English finally advanced, it was not with thunder, but with resolve. A measured move forward provoked the response they needed. The French attack began, not as a single unified blow, but as a crowded surge. Men pressed forward by expectation as much as command. The first volleys broke the silence. Thousands of arrows cut into the advancing mass, not always killing but disrupting, wounding and unbalancing. Horses screamed, men stumbled. The ground, already treacherous, became a trap as bodies fell and others tripped over them. Momentum slowed, then strained, then fractured. As the French closed the distance, their formations compressed further. Armor designed for mounted shock now dragged men downward. Each step forward required effort. Each fall risked suffocation beneath the weight and mud. The English line held, not through overwhelming force, but through cohesion. Archers dropped bows and joined the fight with knives and mallets, striking where armor was weakest. This was not the clean clash of legend. It was a combination of exhaustion, breathlessness, and panic. The very density meant to crush the enemy became a prison. The French could not maneuver, could not retreat, and could not fully engage. The field had chosen its side. What followed was not a sudden reversal, but a grinding realization. The French advance stalled, then faltered. Units lost cohesion. Command dissolved into confusion. Those at the rear pushed forward, unaware that the front had nowhere left to go. The weight of expectation became literal, pressing men into the mud. For the English, the danger did not vanish. They were still outnumbered, still vulnerable. But the rhythm of the battle had shifted. Where once they had braced for annihilation, now they exploited fractures. Discipline replaced desperation. The longbow, the stake, the narrow field. Each factor compounded the others, until the imbalance of numbers meant less than the inability to use them. In moments of fear and miscalculation, harsh decisions were made. The line between survival and mercy blurred. War, stripped of ceremony, revealed its most unforgiving face. When the fighting ended, the field bore little resemblance to the ground on which it began. The mud was churned beyond recognition. Armor lay abandoned, bodies pressed into the earth. Among the fallen were some of the most powerful nobles in France, men whose lives embodied the very ideals that had driven them forward that morning. The English losses were comparatively light. Their victory was staggering, not because it was flawless, but because it was improbable. An army that had marched in sickness and uncertainty now stood triumphant against overwhelming odds. The cost was real, but the outcome reshaped perception as much as power. News of the battle traveled faster than armies. It carried shock, disbelief, and consequence. Agincourt did not end the war, but it transformed it. The French nobility was shaken, its confidence in traditional warfare deeply scarred. The English crown gained prestige that extended far beyond the battlefield, reinforcing Henry V's authority and altering diplomatic realities across Europe. More profoundly, the battle exposed the limits of medieval ideals. Courage and lineage were no longer guarantees of victory. Discipline, preparation, and adaptability had proven decisive. Warfare was changing, and Agincourt stood as a brutal marker of that shift. In the years that followed, the memory of the field endured, not as a tale of perfect triumph, but as a lesson written in mud and iron. It was a moment when certainty failed, when expectation collapsed under its own weight, and when history turned not on numbers or nobility, but on the unforgiving ground beneath men's feet.